Hello, story lovers, and welcome to another episode of Around the World in 40 Tales. My name is Doreen Vanderstoop, and I'm here with my fellow Storytelling Alberta member and treasurer extraordinaire for our provincial organization and our Calgary chapter, Anne Cowling. Welcome, Anne.
Well, thank you, Doreen. It's really lovely to be here and also an honor to be involved in this project. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for your contribution. It's amazing to have you here today. Now, what I'd like to do is, before we dive in, just to acknowledge that Storytelling Alberta operates on the traditional territories of the Indigenous signatories to Treaties 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10. We also walk in the footsteps of the Métis Nation and the people of the Métis settlements. We make this declaration in the spirit of respect and reconciliation. And before we get to Anne's story, I'd like to tell everyone a little bit more about you, Anne. So Anne Cowling has been writing stories since she was 6 years old, at which time she was introduced to folktales. While she still enjoys telling folktales, she more often tells personal stories, the adventures and pratfalls and moments of joy in everyday life. Thank you so much, Anne, and please take it away.
Thank you, Doreen. Before I dive in, I would like to tell you something about The Golden Fish, which is the title of my story. I'm showing you this book. It's called Old Peter's Russian Tales, and I do hope you can see it. The Golden Fish was first published in a collection by Grimm's Fairy Tales, so it was a German story. And then it was included or developed into a Russian story by Alexander Pushkin. And then after that, it was written by or published by Arthur Ransome, who developed, he was actually a folklorist of Russian folk tales, and he enriched it and made it into a beautiful story included in this set called Old Peter's Russian Tales. Most people know Arthur Ransome as an author of children's stories in the English Lake Districts and also in the Norfolk Broads, about some children who had all sorts of adventures sailing. But few people know that he was also studied Russian and was a journalist during the First World War, as well as studying Russian folk tales. What I like about this story is that it is about ordinary people, just like you and me. And it has a commonality of existence. In other words, it shows us that riches and power can never bring love and happiness. And that is something I think we all believe. So without further ado, I will carry on with my story, The Golden Fish. Now, once upon a time, there was an old man and an old woman. They were moujiks, peasants, and they lived in a tumble-down hut on the shores of a wide blue sea. They were very poor. The old man would go out fishing every day. He'd catch a fish and he'd bring it home for the wife to cook. If things went well, he might catch 2 fish, and then he'd go into the market and sell it for a few kopecks and bring home a handful of flour and maybe a scoop of tea, and they would have that in their samovar, and the old wife, she would make some bread. And sometimes he would go out and he would catch nothing, and then they had nothing. And in the evenings, why, he would sit mending his nets. And some nets, my goodness, the holes were so big that a hare could jump through with his ears up and still have room to spare. It was a wonder he caught anything, even let alone a few fish. And the old woman, why, she would darn his trousers and complain. So one day, the old man set out for the water's edge and began to fish, as he always did. And he fished and he fished and he fished and he fished all day and caught nothing. And then, as the sun was getting low, he cast his net one more time. And oh my goodness, it was as though he had 100 fish in that net, and he pulled it in with his wrinkly old arms, and each fold of the net that came in had nothing. And then at the very bottom of the net was a glittering golden fish, not too little and not too big. Well, said the old man, that'll be a decent enough supper for myself and the wife. And then the fish opened his eyes and spoke. Please, please, spare my life, old man. Throw me back into the wide blue sea. But you talk just as I do. Yes, and my fish's heart, it feels the pain of dying just as much as you would. Well, in that case, and the old man threw the fish back into the sea, and you'd think that the fish would have gone flip, 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 and swum away. But no, it didn't. It stopped, and then with its head above the surface of the water and its tail waving like this, it looked at him with his kind, wise eyes and said, oh, old man, thank you for sparing my life. Is there anything you need? And I will give it to you. The old man scratched his head. No, I can't think of anything I need. Well then, if you think of anything, call and I will come. And then with a flip, 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 and the fish was gone. So the old man gathered up his nets and he trudged back to the hut. And there was his wife. Oh, so there you are. What took you so long? Have you got anything for our supper? Nothing, as usual. The old man said, well, I did catch a fish. It was a glittering golden fish, a talking fish. It thanked me, and I threw it back, thanked me for sparing his life. And it offered to give me anything I wanted. And so, what did you ask? Well, I couldn't think of anything I wanted. And so he swam away. You fool, you simpleton, and us with nothing to eat. Go back, go and ask him for some bread. And so the old man hobbled to the water's edge. Head in the air, tail in the sea. Fish, fish, listen to me. And with a flip and a flap, and there was the old fish, looking at him with his wise, kind eyes. Yes. Oh, fish. We have no bread. Go home. But the old man didn't really want to go home. He had no bread. And so he hobbled home, expecting a berating from his wife. And there she was, slicing this huge loaf of bread, the finest bread you ever could imagine, white bread, not the sort of bread that simple mujiks have. Well, as they sat dipping their bread in their tea that night, the old woman said, you've done quite well out of your fish. But in the middle of the night, she poked him in the rib. I've been thinking, old man, I've been thinking, that bread we have, there's still a lot left, and we have nowhere to keep it. Our old bread trough, why, it's all broken, and it will soon go bad. In the morning, you go back to the lakeshore and ask that fish for a new bread trough. And so as soon as the dawn broke, she poked him in the ribs and woke him up, and before he'd had a mouthful of tea, he hobbled down to the lakeshore. Head in the air, tail in the sea, fish, fish, listen to me. And with a flip and a flap, and there was the fish. Oh, fish, thank you so much for that wonderful bread. But my wife asked, could we have a trough to keep it in? And with he'd go home, he said, and with a flip and a flap, he was gone. And my goodness, you should have seen that bread trough. It was the most beautiful bread trough you could imagine, made of beautiful golden pine and with little flowers painted on the side in red and blue and yellow, and lovely curly brass handles, the finest brass you could imagine. Was the old woman pleased? Oh no, she grumbled. Well, it's a fine bread trough, but if we keep it in this hut with the roof leaking, it will be ruined in a few days. You go back to that fish and ask him for a new hut. Oh, I hardly like to do that, said the old man. Well, he owes you his life, doesn't he? Why don't, he's given us this beautiful bread trough. A hut should be nothing for him. Well, the old man knew better than to argue with his wife, and so down he hobbled to the lake shore. Head in the air, tail in the sea, fish, fish, listen to me. And with a flip and a flap, and there was the fish looking with his wise, kind eyes. Oh, fish, he said, thank you so much for that beautiful trough. My wife, could you oblige us by giving us a new hut to keep it in? You should see our old hut. The roof leaks and it's all tumbled down and it will all be ruined. And go home. And with a flip and a flap, the fish was gone. So the old man hobbled home. And oh my goodness, he thought he'd lost his way. Where was his old tumble down hut? Was this most beautiful hut a moujik could ever imagine. It had lovely curlicues on the roof and a portico and carvings all over. There was his wife striding up and down. Then the two of them went up inside, and it was built of the most beautiful sturdy pine wood. It had a table and 4 chairs and a stove and a sleeping platform, as you do have in moujiks' huts, and a box of wood to feed the fire that was already burning brightly, and a samovar that was bubbling happily on the stove. And so the old man and the old woman were happy for a few days. And then the old woman began to grumble. You just know better than to look above the ground beneath your feet. I was born for better things. I wish to be a fine lady and have people bow and curtsy to me in the streets. And I wish to have servants to do all the work of the house. You go and ask him that I should be a fine lady. And the old man said, I hardly like to do that. Well, you saved his life, didn't you? He should be able to do better than bread troughs and moujiks' huts. Go, go, go. Well, the old man knew better than to argue with his wife. Down he went to the lake shore. Head in the air, tail in the sea. Fish, fish, listen to me. And with a flip and a flap, and there was the fish looking with his wise, kind eyes. Oh, fish, that was such a beautiful hut, but there's no pleasing my wife. Could you make her a fine lady as she wishes? Go home. And so the old man went home, thinking he would be happy living in that beautiful hut, even if his wife was a fine lady. But there was no beautiful hut. Instead, there was a 3-story brick house, and there in the courtyard was his wife, sitting in a chair in a beautiful rich brocade dress, and idle and giving orders to all her servants. So the old man went up to her. He took off his cap and said, Good health to you, dear wife. How dare you call me your dear wife? Servants, take this man to the stables and give him a whipping that he'll never forget, and then find him something to do. And so the old man was dragged off and given a terrible beating. Then the next day he went that he was given a broom and told to sweep the courtyard, and then to have his meals in the kitchen. Well, the old woman enjoyed being a fine lady for a while, but then, as you can imagine, she was not happy. I am tired of being a fine lady, she said to herself. I wish to be a Tsaritsa and rule this whole land. Bring that old fellow who's lurking around the stables, bring him to me. And so the servants went and got the old man, and they tidied him up and brought him to the old woman. You go and find that fish of yours and tell him that I want to be Tsaritsa and rule this land. Well, by now, the old man knew better than to argue with his wife. So down he went to the water, head in the air, tail in the sea. Fish, fish, listen to me. And with a flip and a flap, and there was the fish, looking with his wise, kind eyes. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. My wife, there is no pleasing her. She wants to be Tsaritsa and rule the land. Never you worry about that, said the old fish. Go home and praise God. And so the old man hobbled home. And now the red brick house was gone, and there was a beautiful palace. And there was his wife sitting on the balcony with a wonderful gown and a crown, and all her ladies in waiting beside her, watching the troops drill up and down. The old man went off to the stables and found some soft straw and went to sleep. Well, the old woman enjoyed being Tsaritsa and ruling the land, but after a while she got tired of this, and she called her courtiers and said, go and find that old man who's lurking around the stables and bring him to me. So once again they tidied him up and brought him. I am tired of being Tsaritsa. Anyone can be Tsaritsa. I wish to be the ruler of the land and the rulers of the seas, and tell the fishes what to do. The old man began to tremble. He said, no, I can't do that. You go, or I will have your head. So once again, the old man knew better than to argue with his wife, but he hobbled to the sea with the tears running down his cheeks, and he called in a quavering voice, head in the air, tail in the sea, fish, fish, listen to me. And there was no sound. Head in the air, tail in the sea, fish, fish, listen to me. There was nothing. And then, with the tears rolling into his beard, he said, head in the air, tail in the sea, fish, fish, listen to me. And a flip and a flip, and there was a fish. He said nothing. Oh, fish, cried the old man. My wife now wishes to rule the lands and rule the seas and tell even the fishes what to do. And the old fish said nothing. And with a flip and a flap, and he was gone. And then a great storm blew up, and the seas began to roll, and the thunder and the lightning roared. And the rain poured down, and it poured down for many hours. And then, eventually, the storm quieted, and the sun came out, and there was blue sky, and the birds, they began to sing, and the leaves in the trees began to flutter and sparkle. It was so beautiful. And the old man hobbled back. And there was no palace. There was just a little tumble-down hut that the old man thought he remembered. And his heart was filled with joy. And there was the old woman, and she was singing and washing a pot. And the old man came and sat beside her, and they sipped just hot water, for now they had nothing. And she smiled and was so pleased to see him. And then they began to live as they had done before, but this time in love and happiness. And the man caught many fishes, but he never again caught a glittering golden fish. And I think that if he had, he would not have told his wife, even if he did. And that is the end of the story of the golden fish. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. That was an amazing epic story. Thank you for your very spirited telling. That was beautiful. I just want to let everybody know that if you want to reach out to Anne or anyone at Storytelling Alberta, you can reach us by email at info@storytellingalberta.com. And be sure and join us next week when we will have another tale to tell. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you. You're welcome. And thanks to you listeners too.
For sure. Thanks.